Hi everyone, welcome. As you can see, I'm preparing to check in on my yellow buckets that have European nightcrawlers living in them. These systems have been in service now for 118 days. Last checked in on 2 weeks ago. 14 days ago they got a feeding of just coffee. And well, today I'm going to put in some replacement feeding zone indicators in the form of those coffee filters. Just no coffee today, just this pretty wide assortment of different, mostly root vegetables. I see potato peels, I see some baby carrots might have gone bad, and other soup greens. So I think they're going to appreciate this lovely assortment of foods. So let's get on down into bin number 3 and get them all fed. Bins 3, 4, and 5 were on the schedule today. Over on the side, I've got my prepared bedding in the grit, and I also want to use these soiled napkins as supplementary bedding as part of the feedings, in addition to maybe even reusing some of the top coverings from last time. So like I said, I've got replacement feeding zone indicators, coffee filters, which means we can use this as supplementary bedding too. That's the old feeding zone indicator from last time. This top covering newspaper seems to be in good enough shape that we can just reuse that as well. So let's just check in on how the system looks really quick before we give them their feeding and move on to bin number 4. Yeah, bins number 3, 4, and 5 have been doing good over here with these Euros. I like it when the systems are still shallow enough that I can kind of burrow down and explore, see how things look. So I just started encountering these little clumps of presumably paper. And you know, something that's just a big clump of whatever there will eventually manage to get broken down. But it seems to me like if you can spread this stuff out, fragment it a little bit, especially something like this, you know, very thin material, just to have it all bundled up in a big pile doesn't seem like the best way to help it along to the finish line to get broken down. So hopefully by at least busting it up into a few pieces like we just did there, it'll help it get broken down a little bit more quickly than if we had not. So we put corncob bits into all these systems, and I think that these are the systems where we actually treated the feeding of those corncobs as a little bit of an experiment. I think, why was this? Something about soaking them, something that you normally don't do. I mean, a lot of food scraps that get fed to the worms are stored in the freezer to, you know, enable the stuff to remain in storage for a fairly long time until you get around to using it and feeding it to the worms. But something you don't often do in preparation of giving it to the worms is soaking it, you know. And it seemed to me like, hey, maybe corncobs, if they were just left in water for a number of weeks to soak and soak and soak, then maybe that would make the material somehow softer, maybe easier for the worms to consume, or whatever, maybe even help the bacteria that maybe needs to get in there first have a softer medium into which to get itself situated. So I don't know, I really don't know all the details of the breakdown process, but I figured maybe soaking would help that a little bit, you know. So the corn cobs in here were soaked. I've even kind of gone beyond that now at this point, because I had more corn cobs that were also soaking when these were deployed into here. I don't know how long ago, quite some time ago at this point, I think. And then I not only soaked them, but then I froze them, and I have since soaked them a second time and have returned them to the freezer again. So like sort of double soaked, double frozen, which I don't think I've even mentioned anywhere yet so far in any of my videos. So it's kind of like a little sneak preview into some future corn test. I think the most recent corn test, I mean, corn, you know, there's just so much corn cob all summer long, especially here in New Jersey, that you know, you want to come up with creative uses for this stuff, especially since it's such a slow composting material. Just seems like it would be a nice thing to figure out, is some way to make that stuff vanish a little bit more quickly than it does otherwise. So that's a pretty nice, generous portion of bedding. The only other thing that's been sort of semi-consistent in a number of my check-ins recently, over the past couple weeks, I think, is the... Oops, oh, what happened there? Am I out of water? Alright, let's, I guess I'm going to take a quick pause. Seems like I've got to pump up my water bottle. Alright, well, I tried pumping up my, my water bottle, but it seems to be making these weird gurgling noises. It seems to hold pressure, too, for a little while, and spray and dispense water, but I didn't feel like using it. I think we can get enough moisture dispensed from my little squirt bottle here just to get my already dampened prepared bedding a little bit more damp than it would be otherwise. And other than that, the material in this system is really, really nice. Oops, you know what? I always manage to forget about the corncob bits. So now, when I was sort of pressing there on the first one, where's the first one? Is it this one? I could feel myself cracking it as I pressed it. It cracked and flattened through this direction was the pressure that I applied. You can see a fragment of it prepared to very readily drop off if it, if it was convinced to do so with a little itty-bitty bit more pressure. But I'm going to just leave it be. At least we got a little sneak preview into what kind of progress it's making from that standpoint. Most of the time when I'm doing these sort of worm bin tests, my preference to track progress is just to do so visually and not so much checking how it's holding up as far as its structure and its strength and its hardness or whatever. Although that kind of just happens anyway, right? Because you're handling things. So, yeah, very nice. At this point, we're going to see if we can maybe try to pick up the pace a little bit now that we kind of know what to expect down the stream when we get over to bins number 4 and 5. Okay. All right, let's just bring over bucket number 5 for a smooth transition when we get to it. Let's also get bucket number 3 out of my way. Here, in bucket number 4, I'd like to think that we're going to see very much the same sort of stuff we saw in the first system. So when we get to the second and third system here, we'll see what we see. We'll play it the same way too. We'll just use the old feeding zone indicator as a... Oh, geez. Good thing I reminded myself. I'm going to throw one of these feeding zone indicators over into bucket number 3 because I forgot to deploy it. We'll see if we could do better. Keeping to the plan here. Alright, so, I don't know. Let's press on. I guess maybe just applying feeding zone indicators down here in the buckets is just not very commonly done. Somehow they just never seem to get feeding zone indicators. The last time they did, and this time they're going to get them too. And I guess it'll probably be a similar result next time we come back in here, is that the feeding zone indicators will probably have survived and can probably be reused and not need to be replaced. So let's see, 1, 2, 3 chunks of corn so far. I think we found 4 in the last system, didn't we? So it's likely that there's another one somewhere here that we can try to locate. Oh, there it is. And man, there's such lovely castings in these systems. Everything just flows and crumbles so readily. And it's also got a really nice moisture content too. And worms everywhere. Or maybe that's just from me sort of plowing through their feeding zone and pushing all the material over to the side. Let's just take a quick glance down into the material over on this edge. Alright. It's weird because in order to try to allow as much light down into these buckets as possible, I'm keeping my head off to the side, and what I'm doing here, I'm only able to see with one eye. So my other eye is kind of like hanging over the edge and looking down onto the bench, so I can see what's going on clearly, but it's a little bit of kind of non-stereoscopic viewing without the binocular vision. Alright, didn't mean to bring in all that weird jargon there, but I think you know what I mean. It's hard to see what you're doing with just one eye on things. So let's get the feeding zone indicator over here too as a reminder, so we don't forget to drop it in. And I'm trying to remember, did we apply any grit down into the feeding zone in the other system? I might not have. I'm a little bit of a scatterbrain, so I'm not always totally consistent. And as far as the corn cobs go, let's get them down there too. That is where they belong. I'm not going to try squeezing or pressing these. Just going to kind of let them continue at their own pace. At some point I should probably look up what day it was that I put the corn into these systems and maybe report back to you guys with how many days it's been. Because like now that we could see that the stuff is getting pretty soft and tender and easy to crush, I guess hand in hand with observing that progress it's making, it'd be nice to know how many days it's been to get to that stage. And I think we might have trimmed a couple seconds off the completion of this system versus how long it took for us to get the first system taken care of. But you know, as long as things are kind of keeping to the plan and meeting expectations, I think it's fair to pick up the pace a bit, just so we can minimize the intrusion on these guys. What am I talking about? I'm like the most intrusive worm farmer out there, virtually turning their system inside out as a result of what we're doing. Sorry about that. Just need to move something aside so I can do the nudging over of the container. So, on to bucket number, what was it? 3, 4, and 5. Bucket number 5. Presumably, what we'll find when we get in here is just more of the same, which I've definitely approved of so far. So let's see how the wormies here in bucket number 5 are coming along. All right. Once again, we'll encounter corn bits, most likely 4 of them. Good many worms hanging out down the middle, which is where we typically feed. Although, you know, after 14 days, it's hard to imagine that anything of what we gave them last time would still remain, since it was just coffee. I think there was maybe either worm chow or pulverized peanut shell. Some sort of a light color, brown color, dry, powdery stuff went in as part of the feeding alongside the coffee last time. I just can't recall what it was. Here too, I'm finding big chunks of not breaking down material that probably would have broken down by now if it wasn't all mounded up this way. So I'm helping it along, just trying to fragment these little piles of paper a little bit. And you know what, let's move these corn cobs aside. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got all the corn cobs. Let's just make sure we've checked out the entirety of the system. Yeah, we've more or less tilled up every every cubic inch of this system. Yeah, hopefully it doesn't cause the worms to get into a tizzy. I mean, I can't imagine worms exiting this system. I mean, I'm sure it can happen. But it just seems like for them to get out, they would have to cover so much dry material that at some point in their journey up to the top rim of a container with such a big sidewall that they would kind of run out of interest due to the absence of moisture on the material that they're cruising around on. So here we go, third version of what we did 2 of already. And it is nice when everything's kind of humming along consistently. We definitely, you know, put effort into maintaining consistency. So it's not surprising, I guess. But it is nice. And, you know, as far as consistency goes, I wonder if these little guys are going to get sort of a little bonus in terms of quantity. They might have. Maybe I wasn't doing such a good job divvying out the stuff evenly. These little guys might have received a little bit more than the other systems, but I'm not going to sweat it. That's a-okay. And it doesn't mean we're going to go skimpy on giving them bedding either. Let's give them just as much as the other systems got. Nice little setup, and guess what? Once again, I forgot to submerge the old foods. Try to get the corn back where the action is. 1, 2, 3. And there was a 4th one. There it is. Okay, so fun systems coming along really nice. Last time I ran buckets, I somehow ended up getting very, very full, you know. And when you're working in a system like this with a fairly high amount of material, or how do you say high amount, with a large amount of material in the bucket, it does make it a little bit trickier to check things out. So like as easy as it was for us here today to go right to the bottom and check all the way through all the material, once the material gets further up, it becomes more and more difficult to excavate down and take a peek. So it is enjoyable working on these relative to what it was like last time I ran the yellow buckets, in which we just found it pretty tough to be able to get a clear picture of what was happening throughout the system. In these systems, it just seems like everything's looking really nice. Nice flaky castings, nice moisture level, lots of healthy looking worms scattered throughout the system everywhere. So I'm very pleased with how these little guys are coming along. So that's it for the check-in, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.